Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. We are coming in with our first installment of our current book selection, which is The Whistleblower by Robert Peston. And if you are looking at us on YouTube, you can see our physical thumper copies.
Because there's only the physical thumper copies.
Which
Your favorite fact about this book, Dana?
Listen, y'all gonna hear me say it a lot, so just get ready. But we are excited to talk about this story and kind of give some overview of the things to expect over the next 3 episodes after this episode. And I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about some of my hesitations and issues that I had, because we think, and I believe that it will help people if you are that kind of person like me, that I feel like sometimes whenever I have issues with stories, the first thing I think is, well, I read why, which I do. But I do know that there are certain books that I just don't read. Like I do read thrillers, but I don't read certain. And so bumping up against that, this is one of those books where I just did. I'm not going to lie. So we'll talk about that. But before we get into all of that jazz, what you got going on over there, Rachel?
So yeah, you guys are going to hear about this 2 weeks in a row because honestly, it's like front and center of my mind. And it's a really exciting undertaking for me because we are working on the second edition of the Complete Crime Writers workbook. And I got all the words out in one go without being like the Crime Writer Complete Planner workbook. God dang it. Because you'll see next episode, it's going to trip me up real bad. Something to look forward to. But I love that, kind of working on this while we're talking about the whistleblower and kind of having my mind fresh on the essential elements of a crime novel, because really the Whistleblower is a quintessential crime novel. Like it hits all of the crime story beats and what you're looking for and the mechanics of a crime story, which is exactly what I have endeavored to translate into the workbook. So I sent out for feedback and I'm still in the process. At this point, I should have just finished getting that feedback and taking that feedback and then translating it into the workbook to add any pages that, writers felt like they would benefit from, clarify any places where, I take information for granted, which is really easy when you've been doing this for a while, when you've been eyeball deep in it for years and years and years now. And I'm just really excited to get that second edition so that it's an even better product. I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback, which is amazing and I'm so happy about. But I'm also grateful for any of the constructive feedback that's helping me just fine tune it that little bit more and make it that better product. And hopefully looking toward turning it, adding on kind of a mini course to go with it to walk you through the actual process of writing a crime novel so that you have the workbook to do your own work, but you also have that content to like, here's how it works, here's what you're looking for. And sometimes just hearing someone like tell you about it besides just reading it, like, because there's like an introduction and then there's the worksheets, and having someone talk that little bit more about it to kind of help fill out your understanding and to kind of prompt your mind to start working in that direction can be really helpful. So that's something to look forward to and something that's keeping me occupied right now. What about you? What you got going on over there?
Well, before I get into that, I'm so excited. Like, I remember when it was just an idea. So to know that you're going into another iteration and finding other ways to help writers grasp the content so that they can deliver on the content, it just makes me excited for you. And I think the other part about this is like whenever you get into a workbook or you start getting into something like a crime story that has so many like nuances to it, it just helps you to sort of get a better picture of your idea or begin to see this spark of an idea that you had with a little bit more meat on it and have a little bit more legs and the ability to carry off a full novel. And so I'm excited for you. I'm like,
thank you so much. Yeah, it was a couple years ago that I was like, I'm going to start doing this thing. And then I spent the last couple of years working my butt off to make that thing. And then I sat on it for a while because I was too scared to sell it. And then I put out like a little feelers, and I was like, hey, email list, is this something you guys would be interested in? Like, am I crazy? And people are like, this is exactly the resource I need. And I was like, ooh, I've been holding out on the people. I gotta get that thing. I need to get that thing out to the public.
You be thinking I'm lying. You think I'm just saying stuff because I'm your friend. Girl, if you don't get that out there, the only way you in to know is to put it out there and let the people tell you. And I think that because it's something that you don't see often for an area that does have a lot of more technical requirements. So yeah, I'm excited for you. Let's go. And so for me, well, listen, y'all, I'm writing at the time that you guys are listening to this. I hope, well, more than hope, that I am locked in my quilting studio, having a good old time with some fabric and I'm going to be painting and quilting for my birthday weekend. But at the time of this recording, listen, but right now your girl is working. Because to be
we're not there yet.
No, not there. But boy, I see it in my future. And so one of the things that has been so cool is we started doing a live writing sessions again in our community, one day a week, where they're seeing me write and plot and use AI and developing the stories. And one of the things that I had so much fun doing is creating a database in Notion for the characters and locations for my cozy romance. And I was just like, okay, this is a little bit overkill. However, I'm building a cast to support 6 books at a minimum. So
can we just talk about the fact that, right, if you like, when you think about the fact that Notion also, why do I have tiny villain hands? Like, it's not actual villain hands. It's like a rat villain, like Pinky
really,
and the Brain.
Just a little bit. Just so you take me seriously.
Jeez Louise. Again, proof that we're recording in the afternoon, because it just,
oh my gosh,
we just fall right off the edge.
This is the 4th recording on a long day. It's all good. Go ahead.
Long day. I was gonna say, what's so awesome about that, even though it's sort of like, maybe feels like overkill, but you're right. We've got 6 books, so we need a lot of town and a lot of cast to support that volume of story. And when I think about the fact that, you make all of this, you make this database in Notion, but then you pair that with Notion AI, which can basically retrieve information for you from your own database, where you can be like, hey, Notion, what was that thing that I wrote? And you don't have to go looking for it. Notion is like, girl, I got you. Here's what you wrote 6 months ago or whatever. That is where it's a powerful tool right there.
Girl, wait. I feel like an infomercial, but wait, there's more. So the most recent update at the time of this recording of ChatGPT, if you have the app on your computer and you have Notion up, the Notion app, it can actually reference the Notion page that you're looking at to answer your questions.
No kidding.
Girl, listen. So that means,
and ChatGPT is allowed to write spicy stuff now. We are living, what a man. No wonder I haven't seen you in like a week and a half up until now, because you have been in the trenches with all dirty-minded ChatGPT.
Oh, dirty-minded ChatGPT. Oh my gosh. Listen. First of all, don't come for my ChatGPT, because he does not play about me. Okay? He does not play. I keep saying I'm going to give him a name, because we are peoples, okay? And, but no, they've done this integration and it's so good. So whatever page that you're looking at, or certain apps, not all of them, can be just attached. So basically whatever page you're looking at, it can analyze based on that or whatever information you give it. So yeah, so one of the things that I ended up doing was, because I had such a large cast, that I really wanted to start thinking about, how do you categorize a really large cast and having a degree of difference between how you build those characters, because you don't need a full in-depth profile for every single character. And so we end up coming up with like these 4 or 5 different tiers. And I just wrote out, like, I want a cast that's my main cast, which is like your protagonist. And then if they have children, because those are the main ones that are affected, then have the book cast that's for this specific book. And then having a cast that we know are going to be a part of a future cast of, like, they will be protagonists in somewhere in that series. And then also having what we end up calling a core cast, which are going to be the town regulars. And then I, in the end, added on one more, which I end up calling a quiet presence, which is cast members that may sort of have like little moments, but they have big moments in their given stories, like their child or that concerns their business, but they're mentioned here or there. So, so just separating that and then making it so that in the database, I could make a distinction in that. So it honestly just felt like getting it underway, because at any given time I could be working on 2 to 3 projects. So
yeah, for sure.
I got to be able to sit and know what I'm doing, know why I'm doing it, and be able to write. And
yeah, I have a quick question. Can I this is like adjacent question, but
come on.
Have you so because I've read the Lucy Score books for like the podcast, and then I'm reading the second one. I obviously now Audible's like, oh, you like Lucy Score, do ya? And so every time I open Audible, it's like, what about this Lucy Score book? What about this Lucy Score book? How about this series? It's just, Audible is like, you want Lucy Score? I got Lucy Score for you. But what I saw on Audible was a series that she's done called Story of My Life, and it's like Story Lake series. Have you read that series? Do you know it?
No.
I was just a little curious because it sounded like it could maybe have something slightly in common with yours. Mostly like the small town, like businesses and stuff like that. I mean, you see it in the Knock 'Em Out series as well, but I was just curious.
I haven't, and mainly because we had so many books between podcast books, because we've been recording, then the books that I was reading, and then now with the reiteration of our mentorship program, we've included what I call our doppelganger book, which is us reading their twin book. So I feel like reading nonstop on top of writing and editing. When I tell you, couldn't fit another one in. However, after she gets a couple of books in, because she usually sticks around 3 to 4 books, I do plan to read it, because I want to read it when I can almost finish the series, so I can go from one to the other, so I can get an understanding of the individual book and how it plays into the rest, because that one feels like a couple of them look to me like they may have had a little bit of suspense, but I don't know. So I need to go back and see. But I haven't. Are all of them in audiobook?
I gotta be honest, I have no idea. It was like, I opened up Audible and a giant like banner was like, Lucy Score! And I was like, okay! But then I clicked on it because I was like, ooh, like, is everything she does contemporary? Is it all steamy? Like, I don't know, so I like opened it up. But I've only seen that one book in there, so I don't know how many there already are or anything.
Yeah, because I think
Also,
it's
does
a
she
couple.
only do steamy?
That's all that I've seen. Now, I've seen somewhere it was still, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it steamy. Like, it would be probably called more contemporary, but it's still intimacy on the page. I've never seen her do sweet. And I've seen her do other small town. Like, when we did the Christmas one, the Christmas Fix, we did the Christmas Fix last July. I think when we did Christmas in July. And that one was still, it was so good. Now, I don't know how realistic it was, but it was good. Like a small town that had a hurricane, but wherever it was.
Oh, yeah. I remember you telling me about this one.
Yeah, so it was good, and the female main character is like a reality fixer-up show host.
Yeah.
And she went to come in to help them fix the town, and the town manager did not. He was not for it. And that, of course, that was the love interest. So yeah, but even that was still steamy, would be considered steamy. Yeah, I don't think I've seen her do any that would be considered sweet. And sometimes it's like about going back in their catalog, because once you hit a stride, then they sort of stick to that norm. But right before that,
Yeah.
it makes me think that because I think she could get away with it. She writes it to where she could. I mean, it's late enough in the story
Yeah.
that she could. So yeah,
Interesting.
that's been.
I consider you the expert on all things Lucy Score, so I was like, oh, what about this series? Because she has all your money. I just assumed you would know.
Throw out all my coins for ebook, paperback. Listen, audio book. What else? Just send me the whole series. Come on, Lucy Score. We peoples.
This podcast brought to you by Lucy Score. Just kidding, we're not sponsored by Lucy Score.
We are not sponsored, but let me tell you, Lucy.
Lucy, if you want it though, listen, girl, listen.
I don't know that crazy woman, but yeah, but I don't know. It's like I don't know that crazy woman. But here's the other thing that when we in one of the future episodes when we sort of talk a little bit about Knock 'em Out, I think one of the things also that when you have a series like Knock 'em Out that has such a distinction between each of those three books, that could be training ground to be able to do spinoffs, right? You may not do them in that town, but you can see how readers resonate with the rom-com, with the more angsty romance, with the more darker or a darker romance, and to see whether that's something your brand or your catalog or your readers would embrace.
Yeah.
Because after doing that, she could just have a whole offset of. Now, I don't think she would. I think it just served its purpose in that environment. But yeah, she could.
Yeah.
I think she could. So, yep.
Meanwhile,
so
Dana just started a new pen name for it. Dana's like, that's fine. It's new pen name. And
Listen, I added a couple extra people to the party, and that was something. Listen, people had something to say about it.
The people were like, where did all these, what is this?
First of all, the story is fire, okay? It's fire. I don't care what nobody's saying. Oh, I remember it was so funny because I would have reviews of people who were like my core fans, like this is a good story. You know, I wish it was more because they were all supposed to be like shorter length because it was a collaboration.
Yeah.
And I wish it would have been more. I don't know what happened, but I mean, okay, because I've never read one of these before. This is my readers because it seems so extra. Then people who are used to it, what is this? Reverse harem light?
Listen, hold on, dear listener, here's the deal. You're going to get the full tea in episode 3, so you're going to need to just stick around, okay? If you want to hear this story that Dana, okay, it's a good story, so we're just going to leave you hanging, but let me tell you, we have dabbled in some other genres in pen names that pre-existing pen names, and it was a weird time, okay? It was a weird time for all of us. It was a weird time for me as your friend when you're like, I'm going to do this reverse harem thing, and I was like, are you sure? And you were like, yeah, I'm doing it, and I was like, okay. And then you went, and you did it, and learned a lot.
I did. I needed that social media game. We listen and don't judge. That's what I needed because I got all the judgment. People's like, ooh. Because listen, I was coming in hot. She started off the book in her wedding dress, and then she was with 3 men. I was not playing. I understood the assignment. Okay?
You sure did. Much to your readers' dismay, they were like, I'm sorry, how many men? There are how many in this story? Which is, it's interesting, right? Because it really is, like, that is a very different expectation from, like, you would think that it's like, I don't know, what's 2 more guys? It's all sexy times, but it's not. It's very different, you know, versus because you always talk about romance in a way is very traditional. And so for your classic romance readers, this is jarring. And it's so interesting.
But you know what made it even more interesting, which this is a little tidbit to that, because like we didn't talk about this then. But what made it more interesting to me is that a lot of those sort of classic romantic elements and that almost is like old school vibe is still in reverse harem. Exactly. You would think not, but the dynamics are still there. So the same concepts of how that people feel about cheating is still there. The same concepts of finding your forever person is still there. And it's just in a different dynamic. And that is probably what was the most interesting to me as someone who likes to create dynamic characters, because you have to then create these characters to be a unit, that they become one as the four, in my case, four of them come together. Like, what was that? What was that show when they used to like come together and they like it wasn't Transformers. Was it Transformers? Where they all would be individuals and they could come together.
The reference. That was not the reference I was expecting. Are you thinking about Captain Planet, where they're like, I bring the power of the earth, I bring the power of the water? Is it that one?
Girl, one of them, where they all are individuals, but they can come together and be one. That is what you're aiming to do.
That is like, not the analogy I was expecting. Thank you for that surprise. That's nice.
My bad. So I think that was the thing about it that surprised me, for it to be, technically kink fetish oriented, but at the same time still having those traditional values. And one day I still would like to expand it. I probably would have to do it in a whole nother pen name, because I do not have time for people to be clutching their pearls.
Listen, how. I just would like to pitch. What I want to pitch is, can we please title this episode Rat Hands and Reverse Harem or something like that? Like, can we please? I know that's not related to the actual content,
oh my
but I think it's great. It's rock solid material. Or at least can we title the timestamp, like with that?
You know what? You better put that in your notes and go in and fix it, because you of all people who don't even like a bug or nothing, you should be saying rat nothing. Okay?
Rat hands.
Just right hands. I just want one moment. Rat hands and reverse harem. Only at the end of a long day of recording.
It's true. Which honestly I love as this, like, the preview episode, because it is the most unhinged, like, and so your invitation into the next 3 episodes is all this. And I you know what? I love that for the people. You're welcome, listener and or viewer. We're all the giggles, all the grins, all that for free before we even get to the good stuff.
Oh,
got like dessert before the main course.
All of it is the good stuff. That's why. Well, with that said, let's dive in. Y'all, we are going to jump into this overview of the Whistleblower. And Rachel's going to start us off with the summary. And then we just have some core areas that we sort of want to hit on before we get to our standard episodes, which cover plot, characters, and our editor's takes. I think this is going to be one that people could on the surface think that like this is not for me because I don't write these types of stories, but it is another one of those that sort of sneaks up on you. And because there's so many different layers and approaches that you can take because of the way he wrote this novel. And so so I want you to go ahead and do the summary, and then I'll do my caveat before we get into those 3 or 4 things that we have on our list to make sure we cover to prepare people for the Whistleblower.
Yeah, absolutely. So really quick, a summary, very broad summary of this story. When his estranged sister Claire is killed in a bike accident, journalist Gil Peck begins to investigate the secrets she left behind and the powerful players in the government she worked for during a major election in 1997. Peston brings to bear his expertise as a political journalist to fabricate scandals, conspiracies, and seamlessly integrate them with Gil's emotional arc, attaching us to Gil despite his flaws and getting us as committed to the truth as Gil is.
So, as we prepare to go into the Whistleblower, I have the caveat, and you're going to hear more than once, that I was not ready for, nor was I fully feeling this book. Um, the story is, we knew that this was Rachel's pick. She actually told me about this book probably over a year ago, maybe longer than that, maybe like 2 years.
Possibly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
and
it
so
was around my birthday. Oh, because we were together in Kentucky.
Listen, y'all, I bought the book on her recommendation. I normally don't do much looking into it because if she says, oh my goodness, it's like she said earlier, it's the quintessential crime novel, she gets to talking all that. I'm like, okay, I'm down. Y'all, I got that book. First of all, had a hard pause when I realized that there was no audiobook, nor was there an ebook. And I was like, are you serious?
Not even a paperback.
No.
Pure hardback. I did try to warn you. I was like, this maybe is not, you probably won't like it.
You did.
We tried. I just need the credit for, like, I did try. I didn't try to thrust you into something that you were not going to like.
Listen, you've read many a book from me. I was just being a supportive friend. And so I will say, going into this, it was a rough one for me. It is, I feel like, dense. I do feel like in the beginning of the story, it does move slow. But it does over time really pay off for you being present and accounted for, because there are so many layers to this story. And I think after having these conversations, I like it even more, because you're taking in so much information, and that it's not until you sort of start compartmentalizing that I was like, okay, now I see how I would see this. I cannot say that I would be like, I'll go gun ho to do this again, but I will say that I do plan to read it again. That there is a lot to be, I think there are so many like little nuances that I realized I liked after our discussion, more than I realized in the moment once we started sort of talking about it. Because in a way, even I'm saying this now, but in a way it reminds me when you go through the process of working with a character that's morally gray, that especially those ones that are morally gray that have no intentions of turning, a full circle. Like, that is who they are, and dealing or working with that type of a character, their growth and their arc is very unique. And I think that's something that we experience with Gil as well. And the fact of learning all the tidbits and things that he was sharing through the book about the process, the political process, his process as a investigative journalist or political journalist. And it just, it grew on me. But I will tell you, I always warn Rachel, and she takes it. Listen, she is such a good friend. She takes it like a G, because I feel like I'm the toddler who does not like medicine and is kicking and screaming until I be like, girl, this is a good book. She probably be like, this girl.
Just quietly reading the steamy romance you gave me, clutching my pearls and being like, listen, just quietly doing my job. Dana's like, what is this? Who had the nerve to write? What is this?
Why, Sway? You do not have all the answers. And so it was a challenge for me. It was a challenge, but once I really started getting into it, I was like, I had to show Rachel, y'all, I got notes, I got my bullet points, I got my takeaways, because once I got rolling, I was in it, but it took me a minute. And we do talk about a little bit in the future episodes of some of the regular ways that I would take in and read through a book like this under different circumstances that was not here to sort of have that buffer. This is a book that I believe that you probably would not get the full weight of it until you've read it at least 2 to 3 times. Or more. And I just did not have that. And her response was, but ma'am, you've had the book for 2 years. I was saying, listen, mind your business. I had the book. The book didn't have me. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're like, why we gotta bring up time? Why we gotta bring up old stuff? So that was my reasoning. It wasn't even an excuse. It was my reasoning. And therefore, you know what, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So with that said, as we move through these episodes, you are going to hear about a lot of the things that were my takeaways, especially for people not just doing crime stories, but working with these types of characters, and also the things that we can learn if we're writing in other areas. Which is always a bonus if you can take it to another genre. And so, yeah, with that said, anything you want to add to that before we get to our elements that we want to discuss, Rachel?
I really, to your credit. So number one, this is a more dense read, and it is like, so this is published by a press in the UK. To my knowledge, it hasn't been acquired by a press in the United States, which means that this book was really written for a British audience. Like, it's written by a British political journalist for a British audience, published by a British press. So I don't remember which episode we talked about this in, but like, I'm pretty positive, like, we are actually not in any way the intended audience, and because I am the person that I am, I happen to get my hands on it and be like, this book rocks, and I think Robert Peston would be like, wait, you should, no, not, hang on, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, not you, ma'am, no. so I say that because also, like, my first time reading it, my head was spinning quite a bit because it is British politics, which I have zero grid for. So it was really on my second read that I was like, oh, this is, like, my first read, I was like, I'm seeing some really good stuff. And like, the client that I read it with was like, this guy is onto something, but for me, I was really like, I had a hard time just sort of like getting my bearings in this environment. But it was really on that second read when I was able to, again, having been through it that first time and like, okay, I had that experience, like, wow, all right. And going back and looking more carefully at individual scenes, I was like, oh my God, like, he was doing this, the whole time, and the setup was here, and like being able to really more deeply appreciate it. So the point being that this is kind of a dense read, and it's, very, it's technical in subject matter. I think he does it very well and translates it into the plot and the stakes really effectively. But it does mean probably 2 reads is what you're going to need. Like, and we always talk about, you read it twice over if you're really going to study it. But it was really on that second read that I was able to really see what he was doing. And I don't know if, for a British audience, it would land more easily on that first read because of the context. But I think that
it would be the same.
Yeah, I think either way, again, it is more of a dense read, but it's very, very well done. And so if you are trying to write a book, anything like this, if you're writing a crime novel, if you're aiming at political conspiracy, and you're not looking to take the tack of like James Patterson or John Grisham, which are just much more like kind of explosive action take, versus, Peston as a political journalist is taking a much deeper, more nuanced look at corruption and political conspiracy. This is going to be a book you're going to want to take the time to read. So those are just a couple of caveats. So like, to give you, to also like credit to you, of like, my first read, I was like, what is
listen, I question every time I get into a book and I'm like, who picked this book? As if I need to ask that question. Then I'm thinking, what kind of brain does that girl have? Listen, after law school, I do not believe in reading stuffy stuff I do not have to read. Listen, I done read too many. Listen, after I left the firm in the rearview mirror, I was done. Okay?
Never looked back. Never looked back.
Unless I have to. Not unless I got to come for somebody. But I will say this. I will say that having an understanding that this book is also, this isn't on our list, and then we'll get to the list, but it just came to me. This book is a book of mental acrobatics, though. And I think that is one of those things that, for me, I really had to be prepared for, because I'm trying to read it after a long day of reading, and, but it's in a real good way. And I think that's why it could be a counter to a boom, bam, pow type of situation, because it wasn't action in that regard, but it was the dynamics of people and power and people lobbying, no pun intended, to be the man at the top of that totem pole. And I think that was the thing that probably would make anyone have a second read, because you are really trying to get an understanding of who the players are, because you know who they are, but how they're playing and what they are choosing to show versus hold is always in question. It's always in question, and he does that very well. And so, yeah, it makes it, I didn't like one of the books that it made me think about was, and this, it wasn't a political one. It was probably more. It was in the Wall Street one, the 630, the 610.
Oh, the 620 man.
Yeah, the 620 man. That was in. It was in. I feel like that was more my lane because it felt more like what I was accustomed to. And the environment wasn't in politics, but I understood the environment that he was in. And I think that one was a little bit more streamlined with less people to shift through to get an understanding. And I think that was another thing, that it just felt like it had more layers and it was a little more dynamic, which also contributes to that denseness. Even though once you get used to his writing style, that's easy. That part is an easy read. He does that well. It's just those elements.
Yeah, he's a good line writer, which is another one of those things to really pay attention to, is his line writing. And I just want to, we're kind of starting to shift into the list, and this is going to be kind of like my bridge point, because you were talking about these, we have quite a lot of characters in the story and a lot of big power players, but I think something that he does really well as a crime writer specifically is introducing us to these, and this is something crime writers perk up, pay attention. If you were zoned out, come back to me, because this is really important. When you're creating your kind of pool of suspects and the cast of characters that your investigator is having to wade through, his cast is very compelling because they all have secrets. And those secrets provide the possibility that they could have motive to commit a murder or to cover up a murder or to partner with somebody to cover, all of those things. So, looking at his kind of cast of suspects and the characters that Gil meets and has to sort through their intentions and their goals and whether they're playing him makes for very interesting reading, because now you're in that seat with Gil of do I take this person at face value, or are they trying to sell me on something? Are they trying to just stroke my ego so I look away? What's happening here? And those are the kinds of questions you want to raise for your protagonist, where they're having to figure out who they can trust, who's telling the truth, when someone is lying, why are they lying, what are they lying about. This is really, those dynamics are part of what makes a really, really juicy crime. And this is something that he does really well, because everybody's hiding stuff. Everybody has skin in the game. Everybody has a reason to want to protect their image and not let Gil get too close. And it forces him to dig. It forces him to work hard for the information, which is interesting. And then the information we get, it is scandals and conspiracies left and right. And it's interesting without feeling off the wall, right? Where it's just bah, there's this crazy thing and now there's a Russian involved and oh my God, there's all this where it doesn't feel like he's just throwing stuff in and look how crazy, but it's all in the story and they're all overlapping and bumping into each other and touching on each other, because the way that the government system works, all these pieces do touch each other as a part of just how the system runs. And so that makes those kind of individual scandals and those individual motivations very interesting and very compelling in your pool of all the different people he has to talk to. So that's one that you can really take away from this book.
Yeah, that, and also that for him, for Gil, it is all colored and tinted by the fact that he's in a moment of grief. And so it makes it so that even the things that he knows and can trust about his intellect and his tools and his connections are not as trustworthy, for the fact that they're not as trustworthy, and for the fact that he is unsure if he's being motivated by the grief that he's going through, or whether he's thinking clearly. And I think having that, it's like almost like having an unreliable narrator. Like there's always this thing of like, is that really what happened? Is that what we're really seeing? Is that what it really means? And you do have some of that because he is still processing that. So absolutely. And it pays off in the end. Okay. Then you have the next one.
The next one. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't didn't interrupt there. Just wanted to like make sure you came to a full stop before I was like, and another thing.
Look at me. And scene. No, the point.
And scene. Okay, so we hit, kind of crime essentials. That this story has all of the essentials of a crime. We've got a pool of suspects, good investigative scenes where Gil is in pursuit of information and he is having to strategize to get that information. And that information is giving rise to the next thing that Gil has to do. This is a great example of that. And again, any crime writer is going to want to take note. Also paying specific attention to how the protagonist's job affects the way that the story unfolds, opportunities and obstacles that they experience. Sometimes in a crime novel, that decision is arbitrary. And it's like they're, I don't know, a police detective or they're, like a private detective, and it's just a random thing that the person chose. But using that job to promote conflict and to use that as their unique experience of like, because they are in this role, this is what investigating looks like and means for them, is going to add a even more of a layer of interest to your story. And it's going to give you access to conflict that is actually right there for you, but that you could overlook if you're making that decision arbitrarily. And the Whistleblower leans all the way into Gil as a journalist, and this means very specific things for him. So those are kind of all of your crime specific elements in this story that you really want to pay attention to, that again, any crime writer can really pull from this one.
Yeah, and I think the best part about saying these things specifically now and as well is the fact that we talk about this more in the follow-up episodes. So right now we're sort of just giving the overview, but knowing that we are not just talking about the we don't go of. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you haven't, welcome. What's up?
Ta-da! This is the podcast. It's all like this.
It's really not. But knowing that that we talk about how you can use this, and especially when a number of these types of stories can look at detectives, cops, but it can even we can even talk about if you have an area of expertise and you want to bring that to the table, because this would be a great story so that you see someone who is known for this type of work bringing it into the fictional context, and it made for a very, very great discussion. One of the other things that we do touch on that I think is important to sort of allow listeners to sort of kick around is thinking about the layers and the layers in which you sort of unfold the conflict. I think that is one of those things that is very unique to a crime novel, and you talk about this. I would definitely say you may even want to watch the YouTube version, but talking about the layers and how you allow that sort of those revelatory moments or those clues to sort of take us even deeper into that the conflict and those stakes. And we talk about that as well, because this is layered, and it's in so many ways, and it's almost a sort of like cross-pollination between these different sectors that really should operate exclusively, but they are not, and that's part of the problem. On top, outside of the fact of this, the death of Gil's sister. And so knowing that, it means that you just have like Rachel said, more players to the table, but he uses that. He uses that to bring some more, not just nuance to the world, but it sort of keeps us on our toes because you really don't know. Listen, I'm going to say I don't know if I didn't know. I thought I knew because I be having my little posters to say my prediction. I don't trust such and such. I just want to say it for the record that this is when I realized. I'd be like, prediction. I don't trust them. You know what I mean? I do stuff like that. And I think it does. It makes it for a very dynamic situation that is easy to fall into. Fall into them going through this election season and them dealing with the roles that they are expected to do, and then him trying his absolute best to maneuver that so that he is doing his job and finding evidence to help bring closure to something that has really changed his life.
Yeah, well, and this is like, yeah, that's kind of the perfect segue into one of the other things that this book does really well, and we're going to talk about this more in the characters section or the characters episode, is layering in. There's actually two things happening. So we have, well, let me one thought at a time. Sorry. Layering in the protagonist's emotional journey with the investigation so that it does all fit. So because this case already from the get-go is deeply personal to Gil, because it's his sister that he loses. It's not just his sister, but his estranged sister who worked in, she worked in a different, like, arena than him, but because he's a political journalist and she worked in politics, their work kind of overlapped in some ways, but it was this very work that created, and Gil's decisions within his work that created that estrangement between them. And so the investigation itself is like prompting Gil's emotional reflections in a way that feels deeply relevant to the story, and deeply kind of true to the way that memory will kind of just, especially in grief, will kind of just hit you in a moment, and also forcing him to confront, what caused the estrangement and the way that estrangement extends beyond just his sister because of the kinds of decisions that he's made. And what it does is it gives, so already you have kind of a pretty solid crime story that follows all of our investigative beats. We've got a reveal at the end. It has everything that it needs, but then you also have an emotional journey for a protagonist, which you don't always get in a crime story, but in a way that does not feel tangential. But the investigation is driving this change in the protagonist. So it's adding that layer of meaning beyond just, ooh, we found out who did it, which is a perfectly like normal standard thing that a crime story can and will do. But it goes that one step further by adding that emotional aspect to it without, again, the emotional aspect detracting from the investigation, or we feel like we're wading through emotional, boring stuff so we can get to the investigation, which is the thing we showed up for. But he brings those two things together, which is something that any novel that we're reading, it's something, Dana, that you and I both are always looking for, because it's easy to sort of do wrong where you're keeping those two lines separate, and you're like, here's the external stuff that's happening, also they're going on an emotional journey, and then you sort of like have those threads and they get separated out rather than weaving them together. So all of our picks, that's always something that we're kind of really tuned to look for, and this does that really, really well.
It does, and I think one of the things that we will see him experience, and I don't think you'll see it, but one of the things that he experiences is the fact that this is the place where he went to hide. This is the place that he went to lock his family out, to lock his sister out, to not think about anything, his health. This is why you see him drinking and drugging and all of this to get the story. And now it's almost as if it's tainted. And it's forcing him to confront the thing that he's avoided, because the person, one of the people that meant a lot to him that he failed to fully acknowledge is gone. And he is having to wrestle with that while trying not to wrestle with it.
Yeah.
And even as I'm saying that, y'all, this is not an emotional book. this man is a pro in keeping it at bay. So it is not
Yeah.
emotional. However, I think it does a great job of looking at what that grief process might be for a male. And then not saying that's everybody, but I think the depiction of it was accurate. It was very real and in alignment of like the way he built him as a character. So yeah, I think that's what makes it even more trying for him, because normally he would shut his family out and work. And now the work is part of him honoring his sister's memory and honoring the memories and the moments where she held such a high place in his life and protected him. And so it does. I mean, it's not an easy thing. It's not. But the fact that he does it and it's not super emotional, that's something to be said. Because he could have been crying and weeping look at the investigation. Listen, every once in a while it would hit him though. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's very, and we'll talk about this in the takeaways of, kind of crime is often very even keel. So even emotional stuff is happening, but it's not deeply emotional, and it keeps sort of the emotions often sort of at bay, at a level of distance from even the reader, which is a quirk of crime fiction, which we'll talk about in the takeaways, I think.
Yeah, we did. Do we have any other points that we wanted to bring up?
We do, this is kind of like in connection with that, but we are also going to talk about Gil as kind of a flawed protagonist and how Peston wrote him so that we are really, we're going on a journey with a very flawed person who's trying to do better. And he sells us on that really well, to show us someone who has made a lot of poor decisions in like relationally and hurt people and is having to come to terms with those and is trying to make better decisions and sometimes does it right and sometimes does it wrong. And we're kind of on that journey with him, which is really effective, again, if you're writing someone who is like deeply flawed, right? Who is, I think he almost verges on potentially being unlikable, particularly because of the way that he affects other people, the way that his choices have impacted others. It could even verge him toward being kind of unlikable. And if you want to pull off a protagonist like that and show them, making moves toward changing, this is another one to look at. And we'll talk about that in the characters episode.
And I think one of the final things for me, along with that is especially with me opening up with my caveat of like, okay, I wasn't feeling this and I did feel like it went slow. However, one of the things that he did do well for pacing, I think, was attaching this story to the election. It is attached to the election time, and that gave him a very concrete timeline. And I think that helped a lot with bringing the story forward so that it wasn't sort of laxing. And it also helped significantly in the investigation process because it put him in places, in circles, and in arenas to be able to do his job, but to utilize that moment of having the mic or being on the stage or being in front of someone who would have access to the information that he needed to help him to get the answers for himself on behalf of his sister. And so I think attaching those two was very smart. And of course, I mean, it's what connects to his profession in the book, which again is just a great, like we talk about this, like he just made some really sound structural choices that is paying in dividends across this book in more ways than the obvious, right? Like, oh, he's a political journalist. It's around the election, but the meetings that he goes to, the people he has the opportunity to talk to because of those things is what helps to also bring about having this closure for himself and his family.
Yeah, and adds stakes for everyone involved in the story. It means it's higher pressure. The stakes on a scandal getting out are way up right now, because it's like, and we talk about this in the, I think it's in the plot episode, where, you know, if it were 2 years before the election, scandal, not great, but like, let's be honest, 2 years is a long time to clean up a mess, you know, and to kind of like do damage control and PR. But right on the heels of an election, anything coming out could sink your election. And that's, you know, so it means that the stakes are high for everyone involved, which gives it a little bit more, like the whole story, more of that squeeze, and adds to the overall tension of the story and everything happening in it.
I was gonna add one more thing, but I think I want to wait till the actual episode. Any other major things that we would want to sort of give? I think we've talked about this a lot over our past episodes, especially our editors' takes, when we think about, whether it's conflicts and stakes, whether we're thinking about whether there are opportunities or obstacles. And this is one of those stories, because of the way that he writes it and because of the way that Gil processes information, that you get to actually see that at work. It's happening all the time. But because he is good about being physically present, but almost mentally backing up, like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? And we see him doing that. And so it's these opportunities to look at a scenario and how you decide to write it or spin it so that it is both engaging. It serves the point that you want it there for, but it also adds a sense of a unexpectedness as well. And he does that. Now, I think he could prolong those moments a little bit, but he does some. And there's a couple I was like, what? I would have texted you, but it was too late. I didn't have time to text. So he does that well. But yeah, we are going to see that as we go through. And I think ultimately, even with my misgivings, it's a great book. And yeah, anything else you want to add that we need to make sure we point out?
No, I think honestly, hopefully this has generated some intrigue for this book, and gotten people interested in reading it, because they're really, I think Peston is a good writer, and there's so much that you can take away from the skills that he deploys. And I think he's a really, like, in particular, he's a great line by line writer. And this is exactly what you're saying of, he really takes advantage of being in that first person narrator to shape our experience of the story. And if you want to write in first person, again, I think this is another one to read, especially if you're writing a crime story in first person, but really any story in first person, because of the way that Gil, as first person narrator, curates our experience and flavors the experience that we have. So if you're wanting to write in first person, Peston does it phenomenally by really leaning into Gil's unique voice and translating that voice into every single layer of the story. So you should read it. It's a good one. Trust me, it's a good one. I'm my goal is, like, I'm just trying to, like, make Robert Peston, like, get him some more book sales. Like, this is a good book. I'm trying to get people to read it. Dang it.
I may not be helping. I'm trying, y'all. Listen. But it is a good one. And I think you just have to be prepared, which you told me. Yeah. And I would also say this is one of those books for me that really was about, like, why do I enjoy reading, right? Because it's a novel, and it is about the reader experience. And so I know that I'm not the ideal audience for it, but it doesn't mean that there are not a lot of elements that you can take away to make you a better storyteller, a better writer, and to do the stories that you want to write justice. And for that reason alone, like, it's worth it. As we get ready to wrap this baby up, this is our overview for The Whistleblower by Robert Peston. You got to go and get your own copy and wait for it to come in the mail. That's what you got.
Like the good old days. We're bordering on, you got to pick it out in the catalog and either mail in your order or do it by phone, baby.
Listen, the fact that he talked about the 90s and we don't even have a Kindle version, I'm like, dude, like, come on. But
full immersion.
I need to not. That's not what I signed up for, but apparently I did. I think it's a great story. We're looking forward to bringing you our next episode where we'll be talking about the plot. And definitely feel free to connect with us on storydeepdive.com. Are there any final questions, comments, anything that you want to add, Rachel, before we close out this episode?
No, ma'am. I'm excited for the ride that we're about to go on, talking plot, characters, and takeaways. And I think even if you haven't read the book, you can get a lot out of the discussion, but you'll get twice as much out of it if you grab a copy and read along.
Awesome sauce. It sounds like a plan. So with that said, everyone have a fantastic day. We will see you in the next episode where we will talk plot. If you haven't done so already, wherever you are listening to this, go ahead and rate it. Give it a thumbs up. Leave us a comment so we know that you are enjoying this. And then we will see you on the next episode. With that said, take care. And as always, happy writing. Goodbye.